On this edition of Public Interest, the Jamaican Language Unit at the University of the West Indies says patois could identify Jamaicans as distinct from others, unite all Jamaicans in their communications with each other, and link Jamaicans with those non-Jamaicans who have learnt the language. Is it time to make patois Jamaica's official language? November is Youth Month, and some of the nation's brightest and young people participated in Youth Parliament 2019 on Monday. What did they have to say? And later in the program, it's been 2 years since Supreme Ventures Racing and Entertainment Limited took over the operations of Caymanas Park. What has happened to that deal? I am Andre Jebinson, and Public Interest starts right now. Most of us, according to the Jamaican Language Unit at the University of the West Indies, communicate in patois and would be comfortable with patois being an official language. The unit is now petitioning the government to have that done. So, what is the point of all of this? Joining us in studio is Dr. Joseph Farquharson, coordinator for the Jamaican Language Unit, and Ronnie Sutherland. He's the general manager for FIO 105 FM. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. I'll begin with you, Doctor. Since this is your initiative, tell me exactly what it is you're petitioning the government. Based on what is on the Office of the Prime Minister's website, it says make Jamaican an official language alongside English. What are you trying to achieve?
Okay, so I think the title of the petition is pretty clear. We are calling on the government of Jamaica to recognize the Jamaican language, that's a language spoken by the majority of people in Jamaica, as an official language alongside English. And we are doing that because we think there are certain problems that would solve, plus it also gives us an edge, and we are thinking about the long term of setting us on the right path to capitalize on a fully bilingual state.
When you say give us an edge, what precisely does that mean? An edge in what light?
Okay, so it's an edge in all spheres of our lives. So right now we operate in a situation that linguists refer to as diglossia. And diglossia we could term linguistic schizophrenia. So that's a situation where there are two codes in the environment, two language varieties in the environment, but people kind of have a split personality with regard to those two languages. And so they use one language in some areas, some domains of life, and they use the other language in all of the other domains. But in order to do that, there is a psychological cost to doing it. What we find from the research is that a lot of people who do not manage both codes are left out of some spheres and are also made to feel less than in relation to services that the state provide. That happens in our education system, that happens in agencies of the state, tax office, etc., where those who are providing service provide it very often in English. Now, sometimes they do switch to Jamaican, but when they switch to Jamaican, it is really a personal favor almost that they're doing to the person who is coming to seek service, who essentially is their employer. And at times that person goes away, and we have done research on that. The person gets the service, but the person goes away feeling as if they were less than human.
Okay, Mr. Sutherland, you've heard the opening from Dr. Farquharson. I know you weren't convinced that this is the way to go prior to now, but does what he's saying make sense, given the context of how we operate in Jamaica? Some people are not as comfortable with the standard English as he mentioned just now.
And I'd rather the university spend its time getting people comfortable with English. Yeah, that is what I think the focus ought to be on. I've spent the last 35 years of my life in senior management, sitting in interviews with bright children from poor background, having all the subjects they were required to bring, 8 subjects sometime in CXC and before that GC, and even with good passes in English, but are not confidently or comfortably speaking English. And that is the clincher that gets them out of the job. Then I see kids with less than 8 subjects, 4 subjects, 3 subjects, from background that they speak English comfortably. Mm-hmm. And these first line positions, entry-level position, require English to be spoken in the business. English has been, for all these years that we can remember through independence and so on, been the language of commerce, been the language of education. It's not just that we are just coming off the plantation and need to decide which language we're going to. Well, it's many years that we have been on the effort of transforming people to speak English, which is the language of commerce. And because these kids are not comfortable speaking English, they don't get the job. And you get this kind of bias towards the uptown, as I'd call it, or the higher socioeconomic class of kids for that single reason. Now, I believe that kind of limitation on the poor kids who are not comfortable in English ought to be brought to an end. And that must come with a more vigorous, intense program to change that. Why do we need to change that? Because patois is not going to be spoken in or accepted in doing business with France, in doing business with Germany, and with doing business in America, Canada, or the UK. They're not, all of their communications with those countries will have to be in English because they don't understand patois. So it makes little to no sense us trying now to intensify our grab on patois.
Yeah, but part of the problem and part of the argument I've heard from proponents of patois is that part of the problem Jamaicans have with learning English is that it's really Jamaica's second language. Patois is Jamaica's first language. And so that is also an impediment for us learning English.
And there's no truth to it. There's absolutely no truth to it. People learn second languages by immersion all over the world, every time. My brother went and studied in Russia. He never speak. I mean, English wasn't the base for him to learn.
No, but you're talking about immersion. I mean, many of us will not be afforded that opportunity to be immersed into...
I'm just saying that it is not impossible. You don't need to use your first language to learn another language. It is not necessary. I am also saying that you could learn it that way, but it is absolutely not necessary. And that has not been our approach. But I'll get back to the point that this is not like we're walking off the plantation 180 years ago and we're making that decision now. This is many, many, many years after, with an effort to get people out of the limitations of patois. And what the university must accept is that patois, while very nice, I speak it every day, I love it, it's not the language of every single Jamaican. It's not the language of, I don't think it's the language of the majority of Jamaicans. I am from deep rural Jamaica. I go back there every day. I've been out of that place for the last 45 years. I keep going back. And I'm seeing the speech pattern changing to more and more words of English and less of the patois that I spoke when I was there in the 60s and so on and so forth.
Yeah, Dr. Farquharson, do you have any data to suggest otherwise? Because I know you've done a survey about how comfortable Jamaicans are with patois and how many Jamaicans actually speak patois.
Okay, so yeah, you're right. So there is research. There is research that shows that most people in the country claim Jamaican as one of the languages that they speak, and also claim that it is their first language. So the majority of Jamaicans speak Jamaican. And I generally have to be clear on this, because when people think of the language, they think of it as the language of poor, black, uneducated people. and it's blinkers that we have put on, historical blinkers. Jamaican as a language has been the lingua franca of Jamaica since the 1700s.
What does that mean?
Lingua franca means the common tongue.
Oh, okay.
Spoken by all segments of the society, from the slave in the field to the slave master in the great house. There's documentation, and that's clear because slave masters' children were raised by black nannies. White children played with black children until they got to a certain age. And the historians, such as historian Edward Long, complained that the white women had developed the attitudes of the slaves, they spoke like them, etc. And whereas the young men would have been sent off to England, when they came of age, to study, there was no such facility for women at the time, and so he was complaining. So it has been a long-standing thing in Jamaica, that it's not just black people who have spoken the language, but all segments of the society. So that was just one point.
Right, but what I'm getting from Mr. Sutherland, though, is that what I got from him is that the university, this initiative is perhaps a waste because there's a greater problem. Jamaicans can't communicate in English, and this is the language that they will need when they go to most other countries, apart from when you go to China and so on. And so that's a problem. That's a more immediate problem. Because, we speak patois, but, I think what you're trying to do is get these on documents so people write in patois and people read it in patois and so on. So is your initiative a waste of time?
We have the same goal, we have the same end goal. We have the same end goal, but I shouldn't say that, because I think Mr. Sutherland's method might get us to monolingualism in English eventually, whereas we are proposing bilingualism all the way. Why that is important, if you look at most of the countries around the world that are doing well, education is done or started in the mother tongue. And there's a reason for that. Identity is wrapped up in the mother tongue. And a lot of education, a lot of learning has to do with identity. I'm not saying that people don't make it through the system with, an English education versus a Jamaican education. Lots of people have come up through the system, but then there are lots more who fall through the cracks.
But don't we still have that identity though, even though patois is not an official language? Doesn't it still separate us from Creole in Haiti or any other language in any other country? Why do we need to have it on paper? Because I don't see the challenge in saying, let us communicate in patois. But then you're taking it to another step where you say put the patois on official government documents.
Because there are some fundamental things in our society that we have to address. And that is addressed when the Jamaican self feels secure in their own language, their own identity. Now, there are a lot of people who say, yeah, I speak patois and I don't have a problem with it. But if you dig further, and how you can get to this is by hearing what people think the language is able to do.
Okay.
So when you believe that your language, the language you speak, is limited and can only do some things, this says something about your overall mindset. Because generally, if we check English people, French people, etc., English, I'll say quickly, in the late 1500s, was in pretty much the position that Jamaican is in now, where people didn't really want to speak English. If you wanted a good language, you spoke Latin or French. Here we are today fighting over the same English, which English people had rejected then.
All right, let's take a break on public interest. When we come back, we'll pick up our discussion with Dr. Farquharson and Mr. Sutherland. Welcome back to Public Interest. I am Andre Jebinson. We're continuing our discussion with Dr. Farquharson from the Jamaican Language Unit at the University of the West Indies and Mr. Ronnie Sutherland. He's the General Manager for Fire 105 FM. Mr. Sutherland, based on what is being proposed in the petition, do you see any practicality to actually having it done, where you get a government document, you see English and you see patois on it, and when you get that document in your hand, how many people are actually able to read this document in patois?
Probably zero. Probably zero among us to be able to read that document. The petition document that was being circulated was done in English and in patois. And I'm yet to come across somebody who have any comfort reading and understanding it. We don't read and write patois in Jamaica. And that is one of the reasons why I can't understand why we would want to disrupt how we enjoy patois, just speaking it when we want, whenever we want, under social, relaxed circumstances. You know, so to walk around here in parliamentarians and go into tax office and see, you remember what happened to the patois Bible? $14 million was spent on that project. Where's the patois Bible? I'm here to see a church using it and so on. It made little to no sense. It's not applicable. But I'd want to go to a point, the historic significance of this thing called patois. Because there is this view that we are hugging up patois because it is, we identify with it, and it's part of who we are, and it makes us wholesome and great and proud of ourselves and so on. And that is a misguided attitude and approach to patois. Let me say why. The limits that are on the young people I'm telling you about who are unable to speak confidently and comfortably in English was not by accident. It was by design. When our ancestors came to the Caribbean by way of the transatlantic slave arrangement, came from largely West Africa, and they came with their language. They came with their languages. There are a few different languages and so on, but they were here. We end up with patois because we were raped of those languages. The slave owners, the slave masters, or backwards, you want to remember them, were fearful of their slaves being able to communicate in their own language, writing them, because they were fearful of revolt and so on and so on, that you might be planning a revolt right under my nose and I don't know what you're saying. So you know what they did? As a first attempt to marginalize our ancestors, they divided them up into small groups, different groups, where there were no common language between them, so they couldn't communicate. That was the first step to marginalize,
Yeah, but you're making his point.
No.
There's a common language now among most Jamaicans.
No, let me finish. Let me finish. No, we have to see the process. So we accept that we were raped of our language because the Bakra masters they could not understand what they were saying. So they divided them up into groups where they could not communicate with each other, and then taught them English. Taught them the little English that they know. Because they want two things. You must understand when I'm giving you instruction in the fields, and I must understand you when you're talking to the people beside you. So it was about getting them to speak for them to understand. And guess what? They taught them only enough to make them useful in the cane fields.
But as I said in the opening, the Jamaican Language Unit position is patois unites Jamaicans.
No.
That's the point they're making.
No. What I'm getting to this thing about limitation. I am not. In other words, we might be united in a limited way. You get the point? We are limited in our unity because we can't take it beyond this. I am not saying it doesn't unite us. I would hate to hear our city day when we are not speaking patois for all the benefits and so on and so forth, and the joy from doing it, and the songs that we sing in it, and the poetry and so on. I don't have a problem with that. I'm not fighting that. All I'm simply saying, it was done, we end up with patois to limit us. And it continued to limit the poor.
Yeah, you're disagreeing with
No,
Mr. Sutherland.
because this is exactly what my research is on. So the scenario that Mr. Sutherland painted is not the way that the Jamaican language came about. It's more complex than that, but I don't want to dwell on that because there are, history books, that one could read. I mean, history has gone way beyond that by now. I wanted to address the matter of people not being able to read it. The Jamaican New Testament, which Mr. Sutherland made reference to, is being used in some churches.
I've tried to read it.
Hold on, we'll get there. It is being used in some churches. In fact, the Jehovah's Witnesses don't only use the Jamaican New Testament, they have translated their magazines into the Jamaican language using the Cassidy JLU orthography. And they are using that in their missionary work. They are producing videos in the Jamaican language as a part of their evangelization. And so people are using it. Churches are using it. Now, with regard to the point about people being able to read it, what we have found is that the people who can't read it are the people who have a mental block. Apologies. It's in fact a much easier system. And if you watch people, so they've done informal experiments, taking the Bible out into the streets and asking people to read. And yes, people do hesitate over the first few words and sentences. But by the time they hit sentence 2, they're reading more or less fluently. And this is for a system, mind you, that they were not taught formally. So it means that it's a much simpler system. Now, if you think of it in terms of the English spelling system, you're going to be thrown off. What we have done is to create a system. I'm saying we. It was created back in the 1950s thereabout. Create a system that uses, that's based on one letter or combination of letters representing one sound. And so if you know how to pronounce the language and you know how the letters correspond to sounds, you can pretty much read the language even without a whole lot of formal instruction. So we have taught it to people in a matter of like 20 minutes.
And those people are people who read well in English or those who can't read?
A variety of people. And that's what is good, because those who are quickest are children and people who do not have a whole lot of background in English writing, because that seems to limit people's perspective where this is concerned.
All right, so based on what I'm seeing now on the website, you're at 2,126 of the 15,000 signatures that you need to go forward. Is that likely to happen by December 14?
It is, and we are getting to understand that we might have had more, but some people haven't realized that when they sign up, a link is sent to their email address that they need to click on in order to verify. And so the signature doesn't get registered until you click on that email that has been sent to your, that link that has been sent to your email address. Yeah. So we think we have a bit more, just that we need to get people to carry the process out properly.
And how then will you go about trying to get more people to realize that, you know, the petition is their one, but also when you click on this petition, you need to actually follow up? I mean, what are some of the activities that you're carrying out? So
via social media, we are, contacting everybody we can. Mm-hmm. We're trying to do Facebook ads, Instagram ads, etc., or own networks, getting people to pass it on. And there are a whole lot of people who have signed on. This is not something that we thought up overnight. I mean, the officialization of the language. Mm-hmm. And, with all respect, this is not something, if it were injurious to the nation, we would not have done it in good faith. This is something that people who have language study as their professional occupation have signed on to. So, for example, one of the leading linguists in the world and political commentator, Noam Chomsky, was one of the first persons to support the project. And we have a newspaper ad that will be coming out next week, where Noam Chomsky has signed on to say, yes, this is the right way to go. We have another scholar from MIT, Professor Michel de Graaf, who has signed on because he is carrying out a similar project, especially with regard to language in education.
Yeah, so Mr. Sutherland, and the petition is picking up steam. So say this goes further, where it actually gets to Parliament, debated and all of that, wouldn't that free up some of the people who you have to turn away from your employment?
No, it wouldn't.
Yes,
Yeah. No, it wouldn't.
because you said they
So you would
don't
still
make
turn
it
them
further
away?
because they can't speak English.
Yeah.
So if this barrier is removed, doesn't it help more the poor people that you mentioned earlier?
No, and that's the thing. We think we can legislate barriers or legislate them away, and it doesn't work. You know, we live in a practical world. You know, Jamaica is part of a big global environment.
But he's not saying get rid of one.
English.
No. What I'm saying, my initial resistance to this is that the call is misplaced. I am seeing poor people being marginalized and held at a disadvantage because they're not able to effectively communicate in English. That's what I'm seeing.
Okay,
I don't.
But who marginalizes them?
Let me finish. That's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing.
No, but he's saying you're part of the marginalization.
No, because English is the language of commerce. So I cannot, because I want...
No, Mr. Southern, it's the English of commerce because we make it the English, the language of commerce.
No.
What they're saying is reduce some of these barriers. Patois is our first language. So really commerce should really be in our first language. That's
and I'm saying that would have been fine if Jamaica was communicating and doing business with itself. That would have been fine if we're doing business with itself. So when we have somebody in our office, or to take a call from somebody in Canada or from Barbados or from wherever it is that speak English and expect us to communicate back to them in English. And we are now, in my company, want to actualize what they're saying, to bring people who can't communicate in English to sit in those positions. And it disables the organization because you're not able to communicate in English. You can't do an email in English. No. So it is nice and flowery. We have this nice language and so on and so forth that we embrace and want to make our own, but you have to look at the functional limitations of it. There's no doubt in my mind. However we want to think about it, we do not do business with ourselves.
All right, so closing comments, Dr. Farquharson, and then you, Mr. Sutton.
Okay, so we need to look at those, who exactly is doing the marginalization and the limitation. So that's one question that we have to ask. Is it necessary? You are right. We can't really legislate behavior. That's a difficult thing. But leaders have to take tough decisions. What leaders deal with is the system. So if we take racism, for example, you have prejudice, which has to do with the individual and how they see other people. And you have racism, which is the system. Now, what leaders can attack is the system. And then on an individual basis, we work out the prejudice. But what happens is that people should not be limited because of the language they speak. Right. And that is what legislation
15
addresses.
seconds, Mr. Sutherland.
My position is maintained. We want to empower the poor, and the best way to do it is for them to learn and speak more and more English. It does not come by making patois official language. I don't see it happening.
All right, Dr. Farquharson, Mr. Sutherland, thank you very much. And we had asked you on social media for your comments on whether patois should be an official language alongside English. And from YouTube, Winston Gel says, it is a legacy of all our ancestors from the continent of Africa. It should be official. Anthony Richards on WhatsApp explained that seeing that them sell everything Jamaican, it would be truly appreciated if patois was made official, since slowly but surely Jamaica is losing its identity and uniqueness. And Nimoy Burrows from WhatsApp also explained that it should be made official because we have to agree on the spellings, because certain words in patois have different spellings. We're going to take a break now on public interest, and when we come back, we'll speak to some youth parliamentarians. Stay with us. Welcome back to Public Interest. I'm Andre Jebinson. November is Youth Month, and on Monday, some of the nation's youngest and brightest people gathered at Gordon House to discuss some topical issues, and we have three of them on the program this week. In studio, we have with us Ruth and Ben Goucher and Romario White. On the phone is Taswayne Davis. Welcome to the program, all of you.
Thank you.
All right, so tell me about Youth Parliament. When you think about Youth Parliament, what exactly is it? Because, I mean, you don't affect well, maybe you do. What is it to you?
Okay, so for me, Youth Parliament, it is a non-partisan organization that we are currently a part of. And basically in it, we're allowed to talk about different topics that are going on in society currently, and what is it that our views on it, and what is it that we feel should be done to give like recommendations and policymakers recommendations and suggestions.
How useful do you find it? Is it for you just a ritual where once a year people can come and, you know, make their voices heard and then that's it? Or do you find that there is usefulness in you coming together? And yeah.
Well, originally, I think it's a little different this year, first of all. Originally, Youth Parliament was just about the sitting. You just came maybe a weekend to be trained in terms of policy writing, in the ways of the Parliament, the sort of parliamentary procedure, and then you had a sitting. But this year, it was quite different. So it was a year-long program we had this year. We were assigned to a constituency, preferably where you're from, but if you know that constituency is filled, you might get another constituency, and you had to carry out a project in that constituency, and also you had to meet up with your other youth MPs to come together in your county and do a county project as well. So it wasn't just about the sitting, but also we had to do service to the community. And then at the same time, the sitting itself is also beneficial because, first of all, we are able to give recommendations, as Ruth Ann said, to the current lawmakers. They can use our voice to sort of gauge get an idea of where young people are regarding certain issues. And also the country gets to get an idea of where their future leaders are going to take certain issues as well.
Not because you're a female, but I mean, but why abortion? Because generally people speak about, you know, youth employment, youth being a part of the political process. We'll actually get to that.
Yes.
But why abortion?
So abortion was selected as a topic. It was suggested when we were putting what topics it is that we wanted to speak on. And so you know that currently in the Jamaican Parliament, they're actually discussing that, and there's a special committee that, you know, they're meeting and recommendations are being put in forward. And so we thought it important that a youth voice be added to the topic on what is it that we're feeling, what is it that, you know, we believe should be done to address the area. All
right, so I think you led that motion, or no? But
I was the opposition speaker, one of the opposition speakers.
Okay, so what were some of the discussions or some of the resolutions coming out of that motion?
Okay, so for the opposition, what it is that the recommendation that we are putting forward is that basically the current Jamaican law, the Offences Against the Person Act, Section 72 and 73, we want that to be amended to include provision for women to be able to have abortions if it is that they have been raped or through incest they were raped. So we want provision to be put in place for that, because if you look on international treaties such as the CAT, the Committee Against Torture, they're saying that you should have a place where, in your legislation, where women can get a safe and legal abortion if it is that they have been raped or experienced incest. So we want that to be included.
What side of the argument you fell on during?
Well, I was on the side of the government.
Which was opposing?
Well, not necessarily. The topic of abortion is one that is wide-ranging. And like in the general population, the youth also have a spectrum of beliefs when it comes on to abortion. And I think we try to represent that spectrum. So on the side of the government, what we try to put forward is, first of all, that for any sort of amendment to be made to that section of the the Offences Against Persons Act is that first we have to address the savings law clause section of our Constitution as Section 1312, which actually protects the law of abortion, which means there's no court case, there's no referendum that can actually try to reverse Section 72, 73. We first have to address that part of the Constitution, which will take a 2/3 majority in Parliament.
But wasn't that part of what you wanted to be included when the nation goes to vote the next time around? You wanted a referendum on that?
Yes.
Yeah.
A referendum, one person had suggested a referendum in terms of that, as well as the definition of life. That is what one of the opposition speakers actually suggested. Because his argument is that before we can sort of define whether or not this is abortion versus taking a viable life, we first have to define what life is. That was his argument. And so as I said, it's really, we really try to represent the spectrum of beliefs that's on abortion.
All right, so Tasmin, on the phone, another issue that was included in Youth Parliament was that of youth participation in the political process. Tell me, what is your view on how young people are involved in the process now and what needs to be done to incorporate them some more?
All right, so youth political participation is something that Jamaica is trying to get its young people involved in. Now, there are a lot of young people who do participate, but some of them actually abstain from doing it. And we find out that it's a reason because they are not aware of what youth political participation is. Meaning, what I recommended to the government is that civics be revamped and re-implemented into secondary schools. Because when you look at civics, it teaches young people about their duties as citizens, about functions and the duties of government. And with that, then young people would better understand what the government is about, what it do, and it actually kind of governs citizens to develop good morals as citizens. Right, so it's building local governance among the communities. So youth political participation is something that really needs to be addressed. It really needs to be fixed because there are a lot of youth programs out there, like the National Secondary Students Council. You have the Jamaica Union of Tertiary Students. You have the Youth Advisory Council. These are all programs that young people are a part of, that young people can get the opportunity to be aware of the Jamaican governance structure. So if they actually get civics revamped and re-implemented into secondary schools, this is something that will not just benefit the government. This will actually shape Jamaica. Jamaica will become a country where everybody is involved in the democratic process.
Yeah, but how do you think that will help people? Civics in schools will help people to say, I mean, I don't like what's happening now with the opposition or the government or past administration. So I'm simply not interested because I don't think what they're supposed to do, they're doing it. How does civic help that? And is there anything else that you could probably offer as a solution?
All right, well, civics, all right, so you are not comfortable with what the government is doing, right? But what can you do to help the situation? If you're not aware of the process and the procedure in getting things done in the country, how can you contribute? You can't just sit on the sidelines and find all the faults that the government has, but yet still you're doing nothing to fix it. So you now learn about civics, you know about parliamentary procedures, you know about all the policy that it needs, right? So you are better able to make communication with the necessary stakeholders, and you can now draft position papers or policy papers. You can do what is necessary for change to happen. So you make a recommendation that on a particular topic, and then you submit it to the ministry, and then you follow up with the process. So you find out where it is, who is now looking on it,
All right.
how soon will it go to the government.
All right. You are calling also for the replacement of the maternity law and a replacement with the parenting law. We have like a minute left, so maybe 30 seconds each. your position on that.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so in terms of the maternity law and the paternity law, you said as well? All right, so I believe...
You think men should be getting paternity leave?
I think they should get paternity leave because studies have shown that when you have both parents there and you have skin to skin with both parents, the baby actually has a better chance, their health is better and their development as well. So I think they should, maybe the time, that might be an issue, so yeah.
Okay.
We have to, in Jamaica, sort of encourage the family structure, especially the nuclear family, which has been proven in studies to be the most stable form of family for any child. And so it is best to have both parents, especially at that early stage of life. First 100 days, very important for any child. And so we do believe that men should get paternity leave, yeah.
Any comments on that, Taswin?
Yeah, I do agree
Briefly.
with both of my colleagues. This is something that really needs to be considered because, as they said, having your parents around for the first 100 days are very critical. That's where your life kind of really begins, shaping up of everything about you. So having your father and your mother around is something that needs to really be considered. Fathers should be given the opportunity. So paternity leave is a definite yes for me.
All right, thank you very much, Ruthan, Romaria, and Taswin. And it is our final break on public interest. When we come back, we're going to take a look at Caymanas Park Limited. It was leased to Supreme Ventures a couple years ago. We're going to check on the progress of that. Stay with us. Welcome back to Public Interest. I am Andre Jebinson. We're now going to take a look at what's taking place at Caymanas Park, and Karen Brown has that report.
Dubbed the sport of kings, horse racing is one of the world's oldest and most profitable sporting disciplines. However, since the Depression of 2008, the profitability of the sport was negatively affected here in Jamaica. This resulted in the government handing over the operations and promotions of horse racing at Caymanas Park to Supreme Ventures Racing and Entertainment Limited in 2017. We spoke with General Manager Lorna Gooden to find out more.
Supreme Ventures Racing and Entertainment Limited commenced operation in March 2017 when our parent company, Supreme Ventures, acquired the operations of Caymanas Park. So SVRL for short is the promoter of local horse racing in Jamaica. We are the only local horse racing track in Jamaica, and we provide the entertainment for local horse racing product and other simulcast product to our local punters and customers. Caymanas Track Limited is the owner of the park. So we rent the facility, the track, from Caymanas Track Limited. JRC is the regulator. They are the company that regulate our operations. And so the difference between SVRL, CTL, and JRC is SVRL is the promoter of the product. We offer the product at Caymanas Track, the facility that we rent from CTL, and JRC is our regulator. Nothing is really surprising about the racing industry because we basically knew what we were getting into. But what we have found is that there are some deficiencies that were within the operation at the track that, weren't known to us initially that we have to be repairing. For example, the state of the water facilities. We are now putting in a new well to alleviate that. And the general state of disrepair in the stable area, which we are going to also try to alleviate by building some new stables before the end of the year. We'll be commencing that shortly. Caymanas track has been the staple for the last 60 years. The track locally was previously operated within New Kingston, and it has moved to Caymanas and has been here for the last 60 years and has become a staple. It has become the known horse racing facility in the Caribbean. We don't have any data, which doesn't suggest that it doesn't exist, or it could be a viable option to put a smaller track maybe on the north coast. But at this point in time, Caymanas has established itself as the premier location in the Caribbean and in Jamaica. In terms of revenue, the revenue has increased, yes, but the operation of the track takes a lot. It is a very labor intensive and it requires a lot because we are, as the promoter, have to provide certain facility, and this is free of cost to our stakeholders. For example, the stables. We provide the stables, we provide the water, we provide the electricity. So all of those costs goes into operating the track as the promoter, which goes against the revenue that we take in. So yes, the revenue may be in the billions, but the cost is just as high. We are exploring the potential for maybe greyhound racing, who knows. We want to explore the options of providing various types of horse racing. So we are looking at other tracks to simulcast. But as it is now, we want to keep close to the core product that we're offering. Make sure we get that right before we start to expand. Potential is there also for us to put in a grass track to make racing at Caymanas not only on the sand, but also on grass, to expand the type of racing that we offer. But we are looking at other offerings and diversification, of course. We're also looking at taking our signal overseas, maybe to Europe, more into North America. We're currently with Naira and we want to expand our offerings as well. What we have found is that it is something that is accepted by the Jamaican public. We have Sunday racing and we have a lot of persons who come out, particularly family. And Caymanas Park is a family-oriented facility. We have a entertainment license. So we want to offer product and the things that will bring out the family on a Sunday. So what we will continue to do is to make sure that the facility is open and exposed and available to the family, the children, the wife, the girlfriends to come out and enjoy the day with us. So we're looking at all the offerings that we can put in place to make sure that when persons come, they have a good, entertained day. So right now we wouldn't be able to, we don't have the horse population to be able to make those kind of frequent race days. For profitability, we have to get back to basics. So we're looking at the product that we offer. We're looking at the offerings, the racing cards, how we develop our racing cards. We're looking at how we time and manage our racing day operations. We're looking at making sure that we have enough horses to participate in our racing products. So the local horse racing also, what it does is it brings in the puntas to participate in our simulcast. So we'll be looking at bringing in more simulcast offering because that is what actually brings the people to local horse racing, also out in the OTB network. So we are looking at all the basic product offering and just to make sure we get that right, and then we will go to expanding. But once we get that right, we know that we'll get into profitability, and we're on course for that.
A strong horse racing industry which ensures honesty and integrity through the promulgation of rules to govern the conduct of licensed personnel, promoters, and race meets is the mission of the Jamaica Racing Commission. But what does that entail? We spoke with General Manager Richard Longmore.
The jersey was established in 1972 by an Act of Parliament, and our key role centers around regulate and control horse racing, as well as the granting of licenses and permits to different stakeholders, owners, trainers, grooms, jockeys, etc. And from a ministerial standpoint, the minister looks to us to give him guidance as it relates to advice and recommendations, tax policies as it relates to horse racing. All right, our services is wide and vast, mainly as it relates to the stakeholders in terms of owners, the licensing of owners, trainers, grooms, and the different persons that want to get into the whole business of horse racing. Apart from the persons coming in now and getting into the industry, while they're in the industry, we actually help with the whole development and building of the industry. And how do we do that? We conduct a training, the Jamaica Racing Commission Jockey Training School, where we are the sole trainers within the region for new apprentices or new jockeys. The school is run over a 2-year period, 6 months of intense theory and practical. Thereafter, they go into the field and actually start riding. Our apprentices and our jockeys, they oftentimes go abroad to ride, in particular Canada, and just by having the stamp of approval from the Jamaica Racing Commission, once we send our letter to the overseas counterpart, there is equal reciprocity between jurisdictions. So the training is not restricted to Jamaica. It's an international caliber type of training. The government has given us the resources that we need to do effective regulation. Not only has the government set up the Jamaica Racing Commission by Act, but simultaneously the government has the Betting, Gaming and Lotteries Commission, which they look at it from a monetary standpoint in terms of betting standpoint. So the GRC is not burdened so much so with the monetary and the gambling aspect of it. So our focus is geared towards what happens at the racetrack in terms of operations, in terms of the actual race, and there not being any set races, and in terms of equity to all parties. And how do we go about that? It's basically, we are typically in charge of a race meet. Once a race meet goes off, even before it goes off, we're the ones through our stewards and our veterinary department, we're the one that regulates, controls, and dictate the whole race program. We have a judicial authority wherein we not only can we set fines and not only can we warn off someone out of the industry, but we can actually create a punishment that is in keeping with the law. What I mean by that, Ken Pantry, QC, former DPP, he's head of our first instance tribunal, where almost every Monday we conduct legal hearings, legal proceedings, where attorneys would come in representing the guilty party, and they would have to sit in front of a tribunal where, after hearing the evidence submitted, we make a decision. And that decision can be worn off totally out of the industry based on the gravity, as well as if it's a minor offense, it can be a fine of a certain amount.
A CNBC report in 2014 indicated that between 2007 and 2012, the U.S. racehorse population declined by 10%. Another such report was posted in 2019 by the New York Times, and it painted an even grimmer picture. But is that the case for our local racehorse population?
The actual population of horses, that is going down significantly. We did an analysis of the number of foals in over the last 5 to 7 years, and let me just give you some quick numbers. In 2010, we had in foals 701. Right, that was a number. 2011, 702, 2012, 626, 2013, 625, 623, to 2016, 2017, we're just in the low 500s. So what has happened? Over the last 7 to 8 years, we're seeing where the whole breeding and stock of horses have gone down from a peak in the 700s to the 500s. And what this does is it creates less opportunity for new horses coming in the industry to race. And without new horses coming in the industry, you're not going to be able to full the races. In order for you to have competitive betting, you have to full the races. I would rather bet on my chances with 10 horses than to bet on 3 horses, right? Where one more than likely would be the high favorite. So the more horses we have in the industry, it's greater for betting, and more importantly, it allows the racing promoters, Supreme Ventures, to be able to play with the number of race days more. The race days have been going down. I think where Supreme Ventures has now taken over, and they're trying to create that balance with the number of race days. Strategically, they're looking to Saturday and Sunday. In the past, it was Saturday and Wednesday. And I think that's a reasonable strategy, because as you'd imagine, with the working professionals, it's hard to leave on a Wednesday full-time job to go at the races 12 midday, unless you're your own boss, which not many of us are blessed with that. So I think their outlook for this coming year is not bad in terms of number of races. But to go back to the initial point of stock of horses, that is where the trust is.
And that does it for this edition of Public Interest. Thank you for watching. On behalf of the entire production team, I am Andre Jebinson, wishing you a good evening.